Hello friends, trace amounts of science, computer science today as we explore Microsoft. But I think before we get into what I think their current strategy and game plan is, we should probably look back through history just a little bit. Because Microsoft didn't get where it is by building the best things. No. It got there by buying the right things and then making sure that absolutely everybody else had to use them. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's literally how they began to build their empire. DOS wasn't theirs. They licensed it. Windows wasn't first. They simply out-distributed the competition. And their greatest innovation was just plain old becoming indispensable. You see, all the way back in the 80s, IBM, the titan of computing at the time, needed an operating system for its new personal computer, and they needed it pretty fast. Microsoft, then a small fish, did not have an operating system, so they shrewdly bought a quick and dirty one, QDOS, from Seattle Computer Products for what's basically a pittance, and they polished it up slightly and slapped a new name on it, MS-DOS, and crucially, licensed it to IBM on a non-exclusive basis. This meant that they could license it to every other PC manufacturer too. This deal wasn't just about one OS, it was the platform for what became platform ubiquity. And then came Windows. It certainly wasn't the first graphical interface. Xerox's PARC, Apple's Macintosh, Vision, Gem, they all had a head start on this graphical interface, but Microsoft had DOS on nearly every desk. So they outmaneuvered and outmarketed and once again outdistributed everyone else, leveraging their existing dominance to make Windows the air that all PCs breathed. Even if rivals like OS2 were arguably superior in some ways early on, now they're doing all of that all over again with Xbox. While Sony was out there peddling prestige and Nintendo was trying to sell everybody nostalgia, Microsoft was quietly building up what would become the Netflix of gaming, essentially. Game Pass isn't just a subscription, really. It hopes to become the operating system for modern gaming, and most of us didn't even notice that it was happening. And while Valve and Steam certainly do still exist, simply the subscription model of Game Pass is rewiring gamers' expectations, but I suppose we'll get to that part as well. So allow me a moment to wax poetic, if I might. As I recall the first time that I ever heard about Game Pass. And yeah, I rolled my eyes. Oh great, another Ubisoft Connect or EA desktop situation. That's just what my PC needs, you know? Another fucking bloated launcher slurping up all the RAM at startup. But eventually, I gave it a try. I think I got a $1 trial and a bag of Doritos, which should have been foreboding to me. But I don't know, after what Ubi and EA had conditioned me to expect, well, Game Pass felt like stumbling into a digital treasure vault. It was awesome! It was shocking! It was actually good! Microsoft never won with exclusives. They never won with hardware. They won purely with infrastructure. Game Pass has changed the game, and it's made Microsoft the one holding the controller. They are player one at this point, it's indisputable, you put some fucking spec on their name. So how did Microsoft's Xbox Game Pass essentially single-handedly win the console war without anyone realizing that we were even still fighting it? Well, let's go ahead and break it down a little bit further. Game Pass is a Trojan horse. That might be simplifying things a little bit, but Game Pass didn't kick the door down with any sort of fanfare. It crept in there. $1 trial here, a few decent indies there. It was like a side dish, you know? Something to nibble on while you waited for the big, beefy, real games to launch. But that was their trick. The value kept on stacking up. with their studio's own big hitters landing day one, and before we knew it, Game Pass wasn't really a feature anymore. It became the main course. And I can't deny, it's looking tasty. I mean, you start small. I remember, bag of Doritos, promo code, hey, sure, I'll try it for a month. Suddenly it's been a year, and every new game that you even think about playing, well, you check with Game Pass first. That's not a bug. That is the meticulously designed point of the entire thing. It's the overwhelming volume they present. The paradox of choice where so much is offered that you can't ever imagine yourself not having it. It is the sunk cost of that first dollar, that first month that slowly conditions you. The sheer, undeniable convenience makes any other way of accessing games feel like sorta hard work. Why bother going hunting when the feast is permanently laid out right there in your digital living room? And you want to know the real genius behind the entire thing? Well, I alluded to it earlier. I'm talking, of course, about the fact that Game Pass is reshaping expectations. Full price? Yuck. Physical media? Gross. Waiting months for discounts? Why? That all starts to feel like an inconvenience. Microsoft didn't kill those models, but it did make them feel awfully obsolete. And it wasn't just gamers whose expectations were being reshaped, of course. For many developers, especially indies, Game Pass initially looked like a lifeline. Guaranteed money up front, massive exposure on a curated platform. Suddenly your niche game is in front of millions, and yeah, that is a powerful draw. But the question that begins to simmer is, what's the long-term cost of teaching a generation that games are not individual purchases, but essentially an all-you-can-eat buffet? Somebody tell that kid to stop filling up on Dino Nuggies and Fortnite. And all of this convenience also comes with a question, of course. If Microsoft made it this easy to play, well, what exactly is it that we're giving up in return? And to answer that, as to answer most questions, you just have to follow the money. And the studios, I guess, because Microsoft isn't just building a platform, they are buying up the entire supply chain. Buy more, make more. When Microsoft bought Bethesda, people said, oh my god, that's huge. When they bought Activision, people said, wow, that is historic. And let's not forget Ninja Theory and Obsidian and Double Fine. The shopping list is rather long, and none of this is new. It's the same Gates-era playbook. Don't out-innovate, out-acquire. Remember Internet Explorer? Whew. Netscape was the dominant browser, but Microsoft built Internet Explorer and bundled it free with Windows and choked out the competition, or their approach to Office software, acquiring and outmaneuvering competitors until Microsoft Office became the default. Money makes money, and market share, of course, also makes more market share. So while Sony was kicking back flexing and Nintendo was chilling out just daydreaming, Microsoft was out there writing checks so big that they changed the definition of first party. They didn't bother with winning your heart, they just bought the warehouse where it was stored. Oh, you love Banjo-Kazooie, do ya? Well, how about we buy Rare and never do anything with them ever again? Oh, Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts, I forgot. But yeah, that was it. That was the last hurrah. Fucking depressing. With every new studio that they acquire, Game Pass stops being just a great deal and it becomes like the deal, the default, the ecosystem. It's not about what games they own, it's about what choices you end up losing. Not just which console you'll need for the next Elder Scrolls or Call of Duty, but like the shrinking space for rival publishers to compete at that scale. When one company owns so many marquee studios, It doesn't just redirect players, it redirects talent and resources and the industry's center of gravity, for God's sake. Other publishers might hesitate to fund big, risky projects if they know Microsoft can drop a similar, homegrown blockbuster into Game Pass on day one, instantly undercutting their $70 price tag. Why would I want to pay $70 for just one thing when I could pay $10 a month for that thing and all these other things? Oh, also the $10 a month is for the rest of forever. Still, though, not a bad deal, at least, currently. But these things might change because, think about it. What do you think is going to happen when Game Pass becomes the only logical place to release any sort of new game? Or when other services can't keep up with the bulk discounts? You're not just subscribing to a library, you're subscribing to what is essentially the future of gaming. At least if Microsoft has its way. This isn't just about making more games, of course. It's about making more Microsoft games, specifically. Games that will live on Game Pass, that integrate with Xbox achievements and with your Xbox friends list, with xCloud saves that sync seamlessly. Games that make going anywhere else feel like stepping outside of a warm, well-lit house and into a complicated, untamed wilderness. They're not just building a library, they're building a world that's so cozy that you don't ever want to leave. Just get in the pod and eat bugs. Why would you ever want to leave? And of course, like I said earlier, we have seen this entire strategy play out before. Microsoft did the exact same thing with Windows when they wanted to develop a graphical user interface. It had rivals like Apple's OS 2, but once Windows was on every PC, well, it didn't really fucking matter what the competition was offering. The platform itself became the product. So here is another question I would like to present to you. If Microsoft already owns the studios and controls the library, well, what happens when they start owning the way that you play games as well? The Velvet Sandbox. Microsoft did earn a lot of goodwill by being the quote-unquote open platform. They did embrace crossplay before Sony did, and they let mods run wild on Skyrim. They didn't just sell a console, they were selling an idea. Freedom to play anywhere. Never mind the fact that Valve kinda did it first. But freedom truly isn't free, and it's not always freedom. Sometimes it's just a big velvet sandbox. It's soft and pretty and padded and also fully enclosed forever. Because yes, you can play anywhere, but only if Microsoft is also allowed to be there. Want games on your phone? You gotta get that Game Pass. Smart TV? Hope you like that Xbox app. The mod that you love? Okay, cool. As long as it plays nice within their own ecosystem. This isn't really any sort of actual openness, It's more like managed access, controlled flexibility. Xbox giving you the illusion of infinite space, but really the walls are all made of software licensing and network agreements and of course the subtle pull of your Xbox friends list and all those achievements that you've racked up, all neatly integrated. Why would you go anywhere else? Please let me continue to harvest your data. Oh, the data! Every click, every hour played, every preference shown within their ecosystem becomes another point of data. It refines their strategy and their recommendations and their understanding of your particular habits. Our good friend the algorithm making a reappearance again. And of course all of this works together in order to make the sandbox even more perfectly tailored to your needs. And then it becomes even harder to see the edges of it. And the scariest part, to me at least, old man gamer, is that this is working. We have gone from questioning DRM to cheering for the convenience of cloud access to games. Even if really true cloud-only releases are still finding their feet, it does prove that convenience is a hell of a drug, and cloud gaming really is the masterstroke in the Velvet Sandbox. Play it anywhere, on any device. It's the ultimate convenience, but it also means that you're completely reliant on Microsoft servers, their internet infrastructure, their client apps. The game isn't running on your hardware, it's streamed from theirs. This isn't about playing on your phone, it's about normalizing a future where you don't even need a powerful local device, just a good connection to their service. The ultimate freedom, of course tethered by the ultimate dependency. I can guarantee you right now, in the year of our Lord 2025, they'll find this video in 50 years and say he was a prophet! Because these things will come to pass. Mark my words. So if Microsoft owns where we play and how we play, well then what happens when they start deciding things that we can't play? Because the next part of the story isn't about choice, it's all about control. And one thing that you might learn about me is that I don't take too kindly to being controlled.
We don't take kindly to your types in here.
The fine print Fiesta. Once Microsoft has the platform and the pipeline, well, the next step is pretty obvious, isn't it? Tighten the screws. Not with malice, but, with menus and terms of service and all the quiet efficiency of a corporate sleeper agent. That game that you thought you owned because you bought it digitally, well, think again. Maybe you dove deep into a Game Pass title. Now that one's gone. Not because you uninstalled it, just because the license expired. Remember when massive titles like Red Dead Redemption 2 or Grand Theft Auto 5 had their stints on Game Pass, and then they vanished, leaving a gaping hole in your playlist, unless you coughed up the full price, of course. Or when that beloved indie that you discovered gets rotated out, well, that's the model. Welcome to the age of digital leasing. Does it feel unfortunate? Yes, absolutely, but it's what we as consumers have chosen time after time, putting convenience above all else. It's the quiet culmination of years of a shifting mindset. We went from owning everything on physical cartridges or discs to CD keys and always online DRM for purchased games, and that sparked outrage when it first popped up. Do you remember Star Force or Secure ROM? And all that brings us to where we are now, where the most convenient option, Game Pass, is essentially the friendliest, most value-packaged DRM that we've ever seen. You never own anything. You just have permission to access it, subject to change at any point. Do you possibly remember when Discovery Channel content vanished from PlayStation libraries overnight? Actual purchased movies and shows that people thought were in their libraries forever were now gone and deleted. Well, Microsoft saw all that too, and you better believe that they took some notes, and they learned that the real game isn't really publishing, it's just permission. Even physical discs don't guarantee permanence anymore. Many are just essentially a key, which is useless without a massive day one download that is the actual game. Some games even need an online check-in on startup, just to, prove that you actually own what's in your hand. What you are buying is not the game. It's, let's say it all together now, access to the game. And even if you did buy a digital game outside of Game Pass, think of older titles, early multiplayer focus, something like Titanfall 1. I'm sure a lot of people put many hours into it, but once its authentication servers were switched off many years later, that purchase of yours becomes nothing more than a drink coaster for a lot of players. The infrastructure that all of these games rely on is often as ephemeral as a subscription. Temporary, revocable at any time by server shutdowns or updated terms, which of course we all clicked agreed to without even bothering to read, and that's the brilliance of it! The safety net that you thought Game Pass offered. Well, I don't have to buy it, it's on Game Pass. Well, that also becomes the leash to Game Pass. It subtly discourages outright purchasing. It creates that bit of anxiety. Well, should I start this 100-hour RPG? What if it leaves next month? That's a lot of what motivated me to buy Oblivion, isn't it? It's all the convenience of access worship, but with the insecurity of ownership. Game Pass is bundling the convenience of the access wars with the insecurity of actual ownership. And you gotta wonder a little, does this model start to influence game design itself? Will we see more games structured for endless engagement and seasonal content for keeping you on that subscription hook rather than, a finite, completable experience for whatever, $40, $60, God forbid, $70, $80. So what happens when creators are trying to work around these limits? Do they get caught up in the system as well? Well, I'll tell you in the next chapter. Terms of creativity. In every one of these essays, this chapter always essentially ends the same way. Creators get caught in the blast radius, blasted right in the ass. Nintendo silences, Sony curates, and now Xbox moderates. Xbox does have a friendlier face, I grant you that, but friendlier does not mean free. Ask the folks running emulators on their Series X in dev mode, a feature once more accessible, only to see content about it get flagged or demonetized online. Or try showcasing mods for Game Pass PC titles that Xbox deems too close to circumventing their ecosystem. Maybe it unlocks something it shouldn't, or just looks too unofficial. The platform does tolerate creativity, at least right up until it bumps up against the invisible fences of their terms of service. I can't believe you bumped into that invisible fence. Didn't you see that invisible fence right there? Xbox's official line for modding on PC Game Pass titles is generally pretty permissive, but the moment that your creative work is perceived to challenge their control through emulating other platforms too visibly or modifying game files in ways that might skirt their store or service's integrity, well, these community guidelines can become a very effective and also very opaque tool. Often, these terms of service include broad clauses about maintaining ecosystem integrity or prohibiting unauthorized modifications, which grant them enormous discretionary power. And of course, this doesn't just affect current creators. Like, what about game preservation? We've not talked about that quite enough throughout this series. It was mentioned briefly in Nintendo, but it is so important. So many older titles just abandoned by publishers, but they're kept alive by fan-made patches and mods and emulators. And if the platform holder decides these efforts violate their terms of creativity, well, then a piece of gaming history can be effectively erased or made inaccessible to a new generation. And sometimes, the platform features that creators or communities rely on can subtly change or lose support. These aren't always headline-grabbing removals, but like I said earlier, quiet shifts in the guardrails that can impact how you share or what gets seen. The fear isn't always an outright ban. Oh yeah, DMCA strikes are a real threat. But even worse than that might be digital invisibility. Your content just doesn't get promoted, gets buried by an algorithm. Xbox doesn't need to really silence you with a hammer. they can just ensure that your voice does not carry inside of their stadium. And this can have a chilling effect. If critical commentary or investigative journalism or even just showcasing unapproved ways to use their platform might lead to your content being buried or your access restricted, exactly how much will you self-censor? What is the price for your freedom? And I guess all of that brings us up into the final chapter of this piece. If Xbox won by being the nicest landlord in town, well, what happens once they stop offering month-to-month leases? Why I'm still worried. Alright, look, I want to emphasize, I am not mad at Xbox. I'm not even really disappointed in Microsoft. Honestly, I'm impressed. They did what Sony and Nintendo failed to do. They figured out how to make corporate dominance feel cozy. Game Pass works. And yes, it's a fantastic deal. For now. But when the dust settles and the competition's been thinned out, well, what happens then? Microsoft doesn't need to be evil. They just need to stop being so generous. That could mean inevitable price hikes beyond what we've already seen. Or maybe your favorite franchises suddenly get locked in a new, pricier Game Pass Ultimate Plus Platinum tier. Maybe you get fewer third-party blockbusters day one on the standard pass. Or perhaps we could start seeing ads discreetly woven into the Game Pass experience. If they think they can get away with it, they'll try it. We've learned that by now. And of course, all of these things that I talk about circle back around into the wider game economy, because yes, if Game Pass becomes the place to play, well, what happens to the perceived value of standalone games? How do small publishers or indie developers who can't get a Game Pass deal or even don't want one compete when players expect a vast library for a monthly fee? Does it create a two-tiered industry? Those inside the Microsoft Kingdom walls and the peons struggling outside? It might be closer than you think. I still use Game Pass, you know. I still enjoy Xbox, but I keep one eye on the unsubscribe button. Because, yes, I have read this story before, as I said. It started with MS-DOS and Windows, and it ends with everything being licensed and nothing being owned. And remember Windows dominance? It didn't mean that everyone just used Windows. It meant that alternate OS innovations were struggling for air. It meant that developers for a long time had to play by Microsoft's rules, in Microsoft's marketplace, and sometimes to their own detriment. This means that if software didn't neatly fit the Windows paradigm or challenged Microsoft's own offerings, well, then they would have a harder time finding purchase. Could we possibly see a gaming future where innovative gameplay or distribution models that don't align with the subscription more is more fire hose get less oxygen or less funding because they don't serve the platform's primary goal, which is, of course, retention? So no, I'm not quitting Xbox, but I'm going to take a big step back and watch real close, because this time the Empire is wearing a hoodie and handing out gift cards, championing crossplay, touting backwards compatibility. I mean, yeah, they have built some immense goodwill, which makes this new form of dominance feel sort of like a friendly embrace, and all the while, every choice, every download, every hour of gameplay, meticulously logged. In an age of powerful AI, this vast trove of player data isn't just for tailoring your Game Pass recommendations. It is an immensely valuable asset for Microsoft's broader technological ambitions. The Empire isn't just wearing a hoodie, that motherfucker's wearing a wire!
What? You son of a... They took Minesweeper, Chief. They took it from Gubbins. It was pre-installed, and they still took it. Never forgive, never forget. Minesweeper forever. Gubbins.
When we reconvene, we will talk about the one company that really didn't try to control the culture. It didn't aggressively buy up the entire supply chain. They just, legitimately let you play. Valve, Steam, the last free city. Or is it? We'll look at why it's perceived as different, its more open marketplace policies, its deep embrace of user content and modding, and whether that model is truly safe. I guess I'll see you then. Check out the Patreon, YouTube memberships, Fourth Wall for the merch. Always remember, friends, you are loved, you are worthy, you definitely deserve it, and I shall see you in the next one. Until then, bye-bye.
In a city made of dreams, neon lights and secret schemes.
Nice combo.
In the dark. Every crush leaves a
Impressive.
mark. Pixel love and sugar lies.
Unstoppable.
Pretty faces, alibis. Match 3, 2, 1,
Perfection.
let the